too. So when I ask questions, feel free to participate. That's kind of like I feed off your energy. So I want to say thank you to the Hamblen County NAACP, the Juneteenth whole team and committee, the Diversity Council that brought me here today. I'm honored and blessed to be here, and don't take it lightly. I'm not going to say much about me because it's not about me. I came here to share a little bit of a message with you, and that's what I'm going to do, if that's okay. All right? I heard somebody yell back there, act like you in church, for goodness sake. You all right? Okay, so here we go. I'm not sure I want to do this anymore. Any of it. Those were the words I texted to an incredible friend last Thursday evening after leaving the Hawkins County Board of Education meeting. See, a group of us had come there in support of Erica, the mother of a biracial student in Hawkins County, who's recently filed a $2.5 million federal civil rights lawsuit for racial discrimination, racial harassment, bullying, and no protection from the school system. So I interviewed her and another mother, several months ago, and working with the Hamblen County NAACP and Washington County NAACP, we organized an advocacy group. We've been having regular meetings and going and having solidarity sit-ins just to try to bring awareness. And bringing that awareness also included an attempt to get the local media involved, which sometimes can be difficult when we're trying to get our voices heard, and it has to deal with the system, and it has to do with racism. And so it was that culmination of events, right? The board meeting and the struggles with the media that brought me to write those words on Thursday night. Now you might be wondering, what does this have to do with today? Well, I was told that the theme for today's event is education in a united celebration. And when I heard this, all I could think about is the fact that almost half a century later, since I personally experienced racist bullying and harassment in a Northeast Tennessee public school system, we are still fighting. We are still fighting for safe learning environments for children of color in our public schools in this region. That's why I text those words to my friend on Thursday night. I'm not sure I want to do this anymore, any of it. If you've ever been involved in the work of trying to fight for people, to advocate for people, you understand what it is to say those words. I was simply tired, I was frustrated, and I was hurt. And I know hearing me say the word hurt, you might think, what do you mean you were hurt? I was hurt. I am still hurt. And yet, I'm hopeful. And I think that is the place where so many of us reside, in that space between hurt and hopeful. I would imagine that that's the place our ancestors were also in when the federal troops arrived in Galveston, Texas in 1865 with the news that they had been freed. They were hurt because they'd been enslaved to start with. Hurt that the news had taken 2.5 years to reach them. Hurt that it had taken a war to make it happen. And yet hopeful. Hopeful that although we had been classified as property, hopeful that although our worth had been measured by our physical ability to do work and to give birth, hopeful that although we built the economy on which they thrived and benefited, hopeful that although many of them fought to keep us enslaved, that we would one day be valued for our intellect and for our ideas, that we would one day have the equitable opportunity to create wealth for ourselves and for our children, that we would one day, someday, be seen as human beings, maybe even equal. It is this hurt and hope that you have seen throughout the history of Black people in America. It's the basis for the love-hate relationship so many of us have with this country, and rightfully so. Now I know that some of you just tensed up a little bit. You heard me say the words hate and this country in the same sentence, And maybe it triggered you a little bit to get automatically defensive, but I'm going to ask you to just sit tight. Listen to my words and hear my heart, and then determine for yourselves what I'm sharing with you. We live in a world that pushes polarity. Things must either be this or they must be that. And if they are this, then they cannot be that. We like the illusion of black and white, of right and wrong, of good and evil. It helps us compartmentalize things and make sense of them, right? And it's convenient, except that the reality of life is very much like a big ball of gray being lived by people like you and me, who sometimes do good things and sometimes do bad things, right? I like to give a very extreme example of what I mean by this. So listen to this description. There's a man who is an Air Force veteran, a Boy Scout leader, the president of his church council, loving father, and devoted husband. This same man also kidnapped, bound, tortured, and killed 10 people. His name is Dennis Rader. You might know him as the BTK serial killer. Very different individuals, but they were one man. Many people would like to call him evil because it makes it easier to kind of comprehend the horrendous things that he did. But does that discount the other goodness that was in his life? It doesn't. They simply coexist. And that's a concept called duality. It's the instant of opposites. So now I want to circle back to my statement about a love-hate relationship with America. I want you to think for me about your own family. Think about your loved one, someone that is dear to you, that you love, that you can be vulnerable with, that's supposed to make you safe and protect you. Think about that person. Picture their image in your head right now. You got it? Now I want you to think about the time that person hurt you. I want you to think about the time that person disappointed you. Maybe they abandoned you, they left you, maybe they hit you or abused you. Did you ever feel both love and hate for that person? Most of us have. And if it's okay to admit that that exists within our most sacred of relationships, within our own families, why is it wrong to say about our relationship with this country? Why does that make me, quote unquote, unpatriotic? Because I'm telling you the truth. Does me telling you that it hurts and it angers me that after my father served this country, my black father served this country, 2 tours in Vietnam, was medevaced home, and subsequently died at the age of 33, if I told you that it angers me that we sacrificed that I missed my entire life with him, and his sons can't even feel safe if they get pulled over by the police, does that discount me as an American? Does it mean I should pack up my things and go back to where I came from, as I've been told before? Does it discount my service in the United States Army? Should I just pack it all up and say, no, girl, you can't say that? I don't think that it does. As a matter of fact, I think it makes me honest. I think it makes me a patriot because I am willing to tell the truth about a country that I've served and that I love. Contrary to what some might have us believe, knowing the truth about our history from varying perspectives and experiences is a big part of how we can move forward. There's a quote that is often attributed to Winston Churchill, and here's what it says. History is written by the victors. You ever heard that quote? Well, what if I told you that the very first sentiment that expressed that quote did not come from Winston Churchill? It actually came from his enemy in World War I. At the Nuremberg trials, Hermann Göring is his name. He said it in German, and when it's translated, here's what it actually says. The victor will always be the judge, and the vanquished the accused. Does anyone else see the irony in that statement and how it's portrayed in history? It's literally giving credit to the victor when he didn't actually say it, and so much of that is true in our history in this country. So by a show of hands, I'm going to ask for a little audience participation. How many of you were taught in school that the Emancipation Proclamation ended slavery? How many of you? Awesome. Now, how many of you all were also taught that despite President Lincoln issuing the Emancipation Proclamation, it wasn't until the U.S. Army won military battles throughout the Confederate States that it actually became a reality? Did you know that they just ignored the president and said, nah, we're not giving up our slaves? Until the military had to come and fight for us. How many of your schools taught you that General Lee's surrender at Appomattox 2 months prior to June 19th had been kept secret from the slaves until after the harvest? Can you imagine the hurt at realizing your enslavement had been held on to as long as possible? That they had intentionally kept you and used you until the last second. Can you imagine the hurt? December 1865 brings the 13th Amendment, and it brings us hope. And then comes Black codes, and that brings more hurt. And then the Reconstruction period comes, and we have more hope. And then Jim Crow, so we have more hurt. Then Martin and Malcolm and Joan Mulholland and Jane Elliott and the Civil Rights Act coming. Good Lord, y'all, that's some good hope right there, right? But then came new Jim Crow and for-profit prison systems, and that's more hurt. The education, realization, and understanding that the 13th Amendment loophole and for-profit prison systems are the modern-day slavery equals even more hurt. The seesaw between hurt and hope over decades upon decades, it's no wonder the relationship between people of color and our country, the United States of America, is delicate, to say the least. I will never forget the day I sat in a military college classroom in 1995 at Fort Gordon, Georgia, and I learned that Mississippi had just ratified the 13th Amendment. In 1995. Let that sink in for a minute, folks. And I know some of y'all are going to be like, well, it doesn't matter because the federal law was already in place. But may I remind you of the argument of states' rights in our history? It's something that we should be very mindful of. Because right now, today, we have a senator in Indiana by the name of Mike Brewin. And this is what he said. He said the Supreme Court made a mistake when it legalized interracial marriage, and that decision should be sent back to the states. I'm a product of one such marriage. My parents were married in 1964, 3 years before the famous Loving case. And they had to be married in Washington, D.C. because it wasn't legal here in the state of Tennessee where I was born. I'm from Bristol. Did you know the state of Tennessee passed a law in 1741 outlawing interracial marriage? 1741. Now, once again, this knowledge brings me hurt, but it also brings me hope. Hurt that such a law was ever passed, and hope because that law was necessary even in 1741. Do y'all get it? Even in 1741, love was winning.
Amen.
Love was crossing racial lines to such a degree that the lawmaker said, we got to pass a law to stop this thing. Right? Love was winning even in 1741. So yes, I have hurt and I find hope. And we are witnessing very similar things today. Laws are being introduced and passed in an attempt to stop accurate historical education, to stop marriage between two consenting legal adults who love each other, to stop the change that is coming. But guess what, y'all? You can't stop change. It's the one thing that is constant. It is going to happen. So again, I remain hurt and I remain hopeful. Because even in our recent turbulent times, through the hope, we must find hope. Now, it would be naive. It would be real naive, y'all, for us to ignore the racial tensions and the divisive rhetoric of the last decade. With the election of President Obama came an extreme backlash reminiscent of the days of Ronald Reagan. Now, for those of you all who aren't familiar with what I'm talking about, I'm referring to the political strategy of the Republican Party to win votes in the South. How many of you all have ever heard of Lee Atwater? Raise your hand. Either you don't count. I know you know. So almost called your name again. Lee Atwater was a powerful campaign consultant. And in 1981, he was working in the White House under the Reagan administration when he gave an interview. And the interview was about the Southern strategy for the Republican Party. And the interview was first published in 1984 without using his name. But then 8 years later, after he passed in 1999, it was published again, and he was given credit for his words. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of a warning. I'm not going to sugarcoat what he said. There are no curse words. But I think we do ourselves a disservice when we don't speak the truth exactly as it was said. So when Lee Atwater was asked how Republicans can win the votes of racists without sounding racist themselves, here's what he said. Quote, "You start out in 1954 by saying nigger, nigger, nigger. But by 1968, you can't say nigger. That hurts you. It backfires. So you say stuff like forced busing and states' rights and all that stuff, and you're getting so abstract. Now you're talking about cutting taxes, and all of these things you're talking about are totally economic things, and a byproduct of them is that blacks get hurt worse than whites. We want to cut this is much more abstract than even the busing thing, and a hell of a lot more abstract than nigger nigger," end quote. That's what the consultant to the President of the United States said, sitting in the White House in 1981, which, by the way, is also the last public lynching of record. Today, we hear lots of talks about the economy and taxes, do we not? But we're also hearing new phrases. Critical race theory, white shame, and politicians even using the term woke. In 2012, when Lindsey Graham spoke at the Republican National Convention on why Barack Obama would defeat Mitt Romney, here's what he said, and I quote, "The demographics race, we're losing badly. We're not generating enough angry white guys to stay in business for the long term." And then we wonder why we've had events like Unite the Right in Charlottesville, Virginia. It is no wonder. The writing is on the wall, and it hurts because we have come so far, and yet not nearly enough since 1865. What we desire isn't the Black national anthem being played before the NFL game. It is about more than the image and name on a pancake box. And we certainly never asked for corporate America to trademark Juneteenth to sell their ice cream. We have long known our market value. We have always been the creators of your great content, the best athletes, the winners of your games. Now we desire to be seen as more than a commodity. We don't want it to take 8 minutes and 46 seconds of your knee on our neck to convince the system that we deserve justice. Because even in this, there is so much hurt that it's hard to celebrate the hope. And yet we must. We must celebrate that the majority of Americans who saw the murder of Judge Floyd by a white police officer were outraged, regardless of their skin color. We saw them in marches, in prayer rallies, and church gatherings. We witnessed the conviction of police officers for the murder of a Black man. Y'all, that is something to celebrate. It is something to give you hope. Now, before you say that it was inevitable that they get convicted because it was caught on video, I want to remind you of a man by the name of Rodney King. In 1995, 5 LAPD police officers beat him brutally in the street, and not even the videotaped evidence warranted a conviction. They all walked away scot-free. So do not tell me that it was the video evidence that made a difference. We are different. That wasn't that long ago. It was the March of 1991. I was just 17. To see the outcome of the Derek Chauvin trial was a day I will never forget. I don't know about you, but I literally held my breath. And I had that same experience 8 months later when I was waiting for the verdict of Greg and Travis Michael and Roddy Bryan for the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. I had visited the intersection of his streets in Satilla Shores in the spring of 2021, and I swear, y'all, I heard the whispers from the trees as they witnessed his hunting. It still haunts me to this day. There is so much hurt. Philando Castile, Mike Brown, Eric Garner, Sandra Bland, Botham John, Breonna Taylor, Tamir Rice, Trayvon Martin, Tatiana Jefferson, Sean Reed. I don't want to keep saying their names. And I believe that we are closer to that reality today than ever. That's why the opposition is so loud, y'all. It's the last deep breath before the death of hate. Now, before you say, well, racism will never be completely eradicated, I will tell you that realistically, I do agree. However, even though there will always be some who feel this way, the vast majority are changing in the way they think and the way they feel. And their numbers, they continue to dwindle. For some, that's scary. Because throughout the entire history of the United States of America, one racial group has retained the power to oppress and suppress other racial groups through the legal, legislative, economic, educational, and other systems. With what is commonly referred to now as the browning of America coming, that will change, and sooner rather than later. According to the U.S. Census projections, the United States will be, quote unquote, minority white by 2045. God willing, I'll be alive to see it at the tender age of 72. It's hard to imagine, because as a young biracial girl who grew up rarely seeing faces that looked like hers with corporate jobs and on the cover of magazines that weren't at Jet and Ebony, right? Much less in major roles on mainstream TV, I see me and the Vice President of the United States of America sitting in the White House. I swear my heart is hopeful. And when I think about my beautiful grandbabies, they're part Black, part Hispanic, and Caucasian. I call them intercontinental. And I think about what they will witness, the world that they will grow up in. I have to remain hopeful. Despite the events of Uvalde and Buffalo, regardless of the hate-filled comments of some on social media, in addition to the hurt we feel because of those things, there is a reason for us to be hopeful. Because in the face of our greatest tragedies, we get a glimpse of what lies beneath the fear. And make no mistake, that's where the hate comes from. Fear. When you have spent centuries using your power to cause harm to people, to conquer them, to kidnap them, enslave them, murder them, rape them, take them from their homeland, or take their homeland from them, as is the case with our Native American brothers and sisters, right? It is reasonable to be concerned on what will happen to you when the tables of power are turned. Except, we have never given you cause to believe such a thing would be done unto you. The vast majority of history teaches you that in addition to our resilience and our strength is compassion and forgiveness, even when it's undeserving. And that is one of the reasons it hurts so much. How can you not see our hearts after all this time? Our ancestors fed your babies from their breasts, cleaned your houses, planted, harvested, and cooked your crops that fed your families. How do you not see us? Where is the compassion and the humanity? It's hidden beneath fear and subsequent greed. It's most evident After mass shootings and tragedies like Buffalo and Uvalde, and upon witnessing this very thing on May 30th, I wrote this piece. Y'all know I'm a poet, right? Here we go. We are reactionary. Good to the beneficiary after the casualties. There must be war so we can make heroes. Ordinary goodness is not enough. We must go viral, spread through the waves, be talked about on the Today Show, because it doesn't matter until they say so or that's the way it seems. Although it's definitely not how it should be, you would think we would have learned this lesson by now. It is never about the one-off, but rather about the consistent. Those who are insistent that love is greater than fear, that some must stay behind in order to bring up the rear. We are in this thing together. Only as strong as our weakest link, as healthy as our sickest, as rich as our poorest. What good is it to eat when your brother is starving? Bellies round with robbery, the theft of humanity. Why can we only have compassion after the killing? And why is it fleeting, lasting only as long as the news cycle until the next tragedy? Another reason to be angry, our thoughts and our prayers. New profile picture frames, say their names, make a new federal holiday, just don't make any real change. We like it this way. Systems and standards that have us striving for things they never intended for us at the expense of us, for the benefit of others, when in reality there is more than enough. There is room at the table. If we are ever able to truly be our brother's keeper, to celebrate our sisters, to honor the resources that we have been given, be good stewards of the places in which we live, because y'all, love is the only thing that is inexhaustible. If we have created all of this from fear and lack, what would this world be like if we rejected those teachings, simply gave them all back in exchange for hope and love, creativity and joy? And look, I don't even know where my other page, here it is. Dare my heart believe that this is a dream we can make a reality. I must. And not only must I believe, I must do all I can to achieve this very thing with everything inside of me, because if not, why be here? To achieve some status they tell me is acceptable, to be appropriately vocal, speaking truth only in limited amounts and never to those in power. No, thank you. My soul will simply not allow it. I can never sell out, will always be bought in to belief, to hope, to love, and to change, knowing that every day is a chance to do it different, an opportunity to unite us and them, a true union beneath that goes beyond the color of our skin, beyond who and how we love, the political party we belong to, what God we believe in and pray to. Can we just love? And if we can love, my papers are going everywhere, sorry y'all. They stuck together. And if we can love, can we let this love guide how we live, so that we will no longer be reactionary, that we reduce the beneficiaries, that war becomes less, that we clean up this mess, recognizing that ordinary goodness, when practiced by the most of us, is more than enough. And then we won't need to make new heroes. This poem is the hope that shines through the hurt and has me standing here today. Despite the events of Thursday and the words I text my beloved friend, despite being tired, frustrated, and hurt, it's the hope that has me here, still wanting to do the work, still hoping to educate in a united celebration where we can be honest about our past, acknowledge the realities of our present, and create a future that is rooted in love, together. So today, on Juneteenth, we celebrate freedom. And then tomorrow, let's get back to the work of ensuring that we all have it equally and equitably. Thank you.